2 in the morning. You're asleep. You have no idea what's happening inside you right now. But two organs the size of your fists are working harder than almost anything else in your body. They don't get a night off just because you do. And for anyone over 60 trying to protect their long-term health, what happens inside those two organs between midnight and sunrise might matter more than anything you do all day while you're awake. Here's why that gap in the conversation matters more than it sounds like it should. Kidney disease is one of the quietest conditions in medicine. It rarely announces itself early. There's no sharp pain, no obvious symptom, nothing that sends most people to a doctor before real damage has already been done. By the time fatigue, swelling, or changes in urination show up, a meaningful percentage of kidney function has often already been lost. That's part of why kidney disease is sometimes called a silent condition, and it's exactly why the small, repeatable habits happening in the background, long before any symptom appears, carry so much weight. Nighttime nutrition is one of those background habits. Nobody feels it not working either, not for years. But the biology underneath it is happening regardless, every single night, whether you're paying attention to it or not. Almost nobody talks about this. Kidney advice usually focuses on the daytime. What to avoid? What shows up on a lab report 3 months later? Almost nobody asks the more interesting question: what is actually happening to your kidneys while you sleep, and is there something you could eat in the hour before bed that either helps that process or quietly works against it? That question is what this entire video is built around. Stick with it, because the last piece of the puzzle is a food almost everyone assumes is completely safe. It isn't, not entirely, and the reason why might change how you use it. Start with the organs themselves. Your kidneys sit low in your back, roughly level with your bottom ribs, one on each side of your spine. Each one is smaller than your fist. Together they filter close to 200 liters of blood a day. That's about 50 gallons, moving through a filtration system you could hold in 2 cupped hands. Inside each kidney are roughly 1 million microscopic filters called nephrons. Each one is running a constant triage, deciding in real time what your body keeps and what it releases. Water, sodium, potassium, the leftover waste from digesting protein. All of it moves through that system continuously. Awake, asleep, distracted, exercising. It never stops. Here's the part almost nobody explains. Kidney function isn't flat across the day. It follows a rhythm, tied to the same internal clock that governs your sleep. Under healthy conditions, blood pressure is supposed to drop by 10 to 20% while you sleep. Researchers call this nocturnal dipping. It isn't incidental. It's protective. It gives the blood vessels inside your kidneys a window of lower pressure. Less mechanical stress, more room to repair. But when sleep is shallow, broken, or simply too short, that dip often doesn't happen. Blood pressure stays elevated through the night. Your kidneys keep filtering under sustained pressure instead of getting their scheduled break. Do that for years, and research links that non-dipping pattern to faster kidney disease progression and greater cardiovascular strain. Poor sleep isn't just tiring. For your kidneys, it can be structurally expensive. This is where food enters the picture, in a way most people never connect. What you eat in the hour or two before bed doesn't just affect digestion. It can influence the pathways tied to sleep itself, and through that, how well your kidneys handle the overnight workload ahead of them. That's the real premise here. Not a random list of healthy foods. A specific set of choices that do two things at once. Deliver real antioxidant and anti-inflammatory support to kidney tissue, and stay gentle enough not to overload a filtration system that, for a lot of people, is already under strain. Now, the tension almost nobody addresses honestly. Fruit is one of the richest natural sources of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds in the human diet. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the main drivers behind kidney disease progression. So fruit should be an easy recommendation. But many of the fruits richest in those protective compounds, Bananas, oranges, melons, kiwi, avocado are also unusually high in potassium. For healthy kidneys, that's irrelevant. Potassium supports nerve signaling, muscle contraction, a steady heartbeat. But when kidneys are compromised, even moderately, their ability to clear excess potassium drops. Potassium can build up instead of clearing, and that can trigger hyperkalemia, a condition that in serious cases disrupts heart rhythm. So the food category richest in protection is also the one that carries the most risk if chosen carelessly. That's exactly why so many people with kidney concerns quietly stop eating fruit altogether. It feels safe. It also strips away one of the most useful defensive tools they have. The fix: avoidance. It's precision. There's a specific group of fruits that deliver real antioxidant value while staying naturally low in the three minerals most closely watched in kidney-conscious eating: potassium, sodium, phosphorus. 8 of them, coming up. Each one earns its place for a different reason. Pay attention, because by the 8th, you'll understand why it needs to be handled differently from the rest. First, tart cherries. Researchers have studied these specifically for their link to sleep, not just general nutrition. The sour variety, not sweet dessert cherries, contains phytomelatonin, a plant compound structurally related to the melatonin your brain produces to regulate sleep timing. Several small clinical studies, including work in older adults with insomnia, found tart cherry juice linked to measurable improvements in sleep duration and quality, in some cases effects comparable to more familiar sleep aids. They're also naturally low in potassium, generally under 200 milligrams per serving, with minimal sodium and phosphorus. That connects straight back to nocturnal dipping. Better sleep supports more normal nighttime blood pressure. More normal nighttime blood pressure means less sustained stress on the vessels inside your kidneys. Half a cup of tart cherries, or a small glass of unsweetened tart cherry juice, 30 to 60 minutes before bed, sits at the intersection of both systems. One caution: sweet cherries, the kind in most grocery bins, carry a much higher potassium load. They are not interchangeable here. Blueberries are next, and they might be the most studied superfood in modern nutrition. Their deep color comes from anthocyanins, compounds linked in research to lower markers of oxidative stress and inflammation across the cardiovascular system. That matters for kidneys because the blood vessels feeding kidney tissue are just as vulnerable to inflammatory damage as the ones feeding your heart. Several studies tie a few servings of berries a week to measurably lower cardiovascular risk. Since cardiovascular disease and kidney disease share overlapping inflammatory pathways and often progress together, protecting one tends to help the other. A half-cup serving of blueberries typically holds well under 150 milligrams of potassium, safe across nearly every stage of kidney function, dialysis included. Fresh, frozen, freeze-dried, all keep most of the antioxidant value intact. Strawberries might be the quiet standout of the whole list. A half cup holds roughly 130 milligrams of potassium, among the lowest of any common fruit, while delivering vitamin C, manganese, folate, and its own antioxidant profile. A handful of clinical studies found strawberry intake linked to measurable increases in plasma antioxidant capacity and glutathione, one of the body's own primary antioxidants, both relevant since oxidative stress is a central driver of kidney disease progression. They also carry small amounts of tryptophan, the amino acid your body eventually converts towards serotonin and melatonin. Pair a handful with plain unsweetened yogurt and you've built something closer to a wind-down ritual than a snack. Then there's the apple. People underestimate it because it's ordinary. Eaten with the peel on, it's one of the better-suited fruits on this entire list. The peel alone carries a disproportionate share of the antioxidant content, in some analyses, several times more than the flesh. Peel it and you throw most of that away. Apples are naturally low in potassium, sodium, and phosphorus, and their fiber slow, fast sugar hits your bloodstream, which matters enormously for anyone managing kidney concerns alongside blood sugar, a combination that's extremely common past 60. There's also a lesser-known kidney stone angle. Apples contain malic acid, tied to the same metabolic pathway as citrate, and a more alkaline urine environment is generally considered less favorable to calcium oxalate stones, the most common kind. One medium apple, peel on, eaten slowly. Simple, cheap, and doing more work than it gets credit for. Grapes surprise people. They sound like an indulgence, not a functional food. But grapes are consistently classified among the lower potassium fruits, grouped with apples, blueberries, and strawberries rather than with bananas or melons. Red and purple varieties concentrate resveratrol and flavonoid pigments in their skins, compounds studied for a possible role in reducing markers tied to blood clot formation, relevant since kidney disease often travels with elevated cardiovascular risk. There's a practical bonus too. Freeze them, and they become a slow, cooling, satisfying snack for anyone managing fluid restrictions, delivering real antioxidant value without adding the liquid volume a drink would. Raspberries bring something different: fiber density. A half cup carries roughly 4 grams, almost double most fruits at the same volume, while still staying low in potassium. That fiber works two ways. It feeds beneficial gut bacteria, which produce short-chain fatty acids shown to help regulate systemic inflammation, the same inflammation driving much of kidney disease progression. Emerging research into the gut-kidney connection increasingly links a healthier, fiber-fed microbiome to slower disease progression. Second, fiber eaten alongside a meal slows absorption of more than just sugar. Phosphorus too, another mineral closely watched in kidney care. A small handful of raspberries with dinner can quietly blunt the phosphorus spike that follows. Pineapple catches people off guard. Acidic, tropical, it doesn't look like a gentle choice. But it's consistently listed among low-potassium fruit options, usually around half a cup. What makes fresh pineapple interesting is bromelain, a natural enzyme studied for anti-inflammatory activity. Again relevant, since inflammation sits at the center of kidney disease progression. Heat destroys most of that enzyme, which is why this benefit belongs to fresh pineapple, not the canned version sitting in syrup. Fresh pineapple also carries a modest dose of tryptophan, feeding the same evening wind-down pathway as tart cherries and strawberries, without anything close to a sedative effect. And now, number 8. The one worth waiting for. Real benefit, and a genuine catch that most content on this topic either skips or gets wrong. Cranberries have carried a reputation for urinary and kidney health for decades, and part of that reputation is earned. Compounds called proanthocyanidins are believed to stop certain bacteria from sticking to the walls of the urinary tract, and research reviewed by major health institutions found cranberry products may modestly reduce recurrent urinary tract infections in women who've had them before. That's real. Here's what rarely gets said clearly. Cranberry products do not treat an active infection once it's already taken hold, and the preventive benefit, while real, is described in the research as modest and inconsistent, not a guarantee. The bigger catch has nothing to do with the science and everything to do with how cranberries are sold. Raw cranberries are intensely tart, barely edible on their own. That's why almost every cranberry product on a store shelf, juice cocktails, sweetened dried cranberries, flavored supplements, is loaded with added sugar to make it palatable. And added sugar, especially from sweetened drinks, has itself been linked to higher risk factors relevant to kidney health. So a product marketed around kidney and urinary support can simultaneously carry enough sugar to work against the very organs it claims to protect. The real benefit lives in unsweetened cranberries only. Raw, frozen, or genuinely unsweetened juice and dried fruit, not the sweetened versions at eye level in most grocery aisles. One more thing worth knowing: if you take a blood thinner like warfarin, some research raises questions about a possible interaction with cranberry compounds. Worth a quick word with your pharmacist before making it a daily habit. Put all 8 together and a pattern shows up. This was never really about eliminating fruit. It was about precision, knowing which specific fruits deliver protection without overloading a filtration system that, for a lot of adults past 60, is already working harder than it used to. A simple evening bowl, tart cherries, a handful of blueberries, a few sliced strawberries, delivers phytomelatonin for sleep, anthocyanins for inflammation, vitamin C for tissue support, fiber for gut health, and gentler phosphorus absorption. All within a potassium range considered safe across nearly every stage of kidney function. No supplements, no complicated prep, just a deliberate handful of whole food, eaten in the window before sleep instead of grabbed at random during the day. It helps to see how this plays out in an actual life. Picture a woman in her early 70s managing early-stage kidney disease. After years of vague warnings about potassium, she'd quietly cut out almost all fruit. Reasonable instinct. Wrong move. She'd also cut most of her dietary antioxidant intake, along with some of the natural compounds that might have supported better sleep. Her sleep had grown shallow and broken. She was also dealing with urinary tract infections roughly once a month, exhausting, disruptive, recurring. Working through a kidney-conscious plan around exactly these 8 fruits: tart cherries before bed and blood pressure, blueberries and strawberries for antioxidant coverage, small portions of unsweetened whole cranberries a few times a week for the urinary tract back benefit. Something shifted within weeks. Her sleep steadied. The monthly infections stopped, with no recurrence over the following 2 months. At her next kidney function check, her markers held stable, a genuinely good outcome at that stage. What struck her most wasn't the numbers. It was the feeling. She wasn't restricting her way through a diagnosis anymore. She was building something into her evenings that supported her body. That shift, from subtraction to addition, tends to be far easier to sustain than any purely restrictive diet ever is. There's a wider lifestyle thread underneath all of this, because fruit choice is only one piece of the nighttime picture. Hydration timing matters. A large volume of fluid right before bed forces the kidneys into a burst of overnight filtration exactly when the body is trying to settle into that lower pressure, restorative state. Spacing fluid more evenly across the day, instead of loading up in the final hour, tends to be gentler on the whole system. Alcohol complicates things further. It suppresses antidiuretic hormone, the signal that normally tells your kidneys to conserve water overnight. Part of why alcohol near bedtime is linked to more fragmented sleep, even when it feels sedating in the moment. Salt timing plays a role too. A heavily salted dinner raises the fluid retention and blood pressure workload your kidneys have to manage during the exact hours they're supposed to be resting, which can partly cancel out the benefit of a well-chosen bedtime fruit. None of these factors work alone. They stack night after night. Kidney health was never really about a single food choice. It's a pattern: how you eat, how you hydrate, how well you sleep, layered onto a filtration system that never fully clocks out. There's a psychological piece worth naming honestly too, because it determines whether any of this actually sticks. Fear-based health advice, long lists of forbidden foods, worst-case warnings, tends to produce short bursts of compliance followed by burnout or outright avoidance. That's exactly the pattern behind the woman who cut out fruit entirely instead of learning to choose it well. Behavioral research on chronic disease management points the same direction again and again. Additive framing, focusing on what you can bring in rather than only what must go, tends to produce more consistent, longer-lasting habits than restriction alone. That's part of why an evening bowl of specific protective fruit lands differently than another list of things to avoid. It gives you something concrete to reach for. A small ritual, not a rule book. And rituals tend to survive contact with a busy, imperfect life in a way that rules rarely do. Worth being direct about the limits here. General guidance on low-potassium fruit applies broadly, but individual kidney function varies a lot from person to person, and it changes over time. Someone in early-stage chronic kidney disease often doesn't need to restrict potassium at all unless blood work shows it's elevated. Someone managing more advanced disease, stage 4, stage 5, or dialysis, may need every one of these fruits measured within a specific daily allowance set by a kidney dietitian, because even low-potassium foods add up across a full day of meals. None of this replaces an individualized plan built with a physician or renal dietitian who actually knows your blood work, your medications, your stage of disease. If it's been a while since your last metabolic panel, the test that reveals creatinine, estimated glomerular filtration rate, and electrolytes including potassium, it's a reasonable thing to ask for at your next appointment, especially past 60. Those 4 numbers give you a real starting picture of where your kidneys stand. No amount of general nutrition knowledge replaces actually knowing that baseline. It's also worth understanding why kidney-friendly, as a phrase, gets thrown around so loosely online, because that looseness is part of what causes confusion in the first place. A food can be kidney-friendly for someone with normal kidney function and completely inappropriate for someone in later-stage kidney disease. Potassium limits, phosphorus limits, even fluid limits, all shift depending on lab values, medications, and how advanced any existing kidney condition is. That's precisely why the 8 fruits covered here were chosen specifically, because they sit at the lower end of potassium content across nearly every published kidney nutrition guide, rather than because they carry some vague reputation. Healthy and kidney appropriate are not automatically the same thing, and that distinction is where most well-meaning nutrition advice online quietly falls apart. A smoothie loaded with banana, mango, and spinach might look like the picture of wellness on a thumbnail. For someone managing reduced kidney function, that exact smoothie could represent a meaningful potassium load in a single glass. One thing worth sitting with as this closes. Most people think about their kidneys, when they think about them at all, as something that either works or eventually fails, with nothing much happening in between. The reality is quieter than that. Slower. Playing out night after night, in a rhythm most of us never notice, shaped in small, real ways by what we choose to eat in the hour before we close our eyes. You can't control every variable in your long-term health. Genetics, age, circumstance, no diet fully overrides any of that. But the choice sitting in your kitchen tonight, between reaching for something processed and reaching for a small bowl of the right fruit, is smaller than it feels and more consequential than it looks. Your kidneys will keep working through the night either way. The only real question is how much support you decide to give them while they do.